Hello, everybody. We're going into the final panel, the final session of our celebration of 35 years of environmental leadership and innovation. So if everybody could take their seats. Okay, great. So I'm Stephanie Furman, and together with Martin Stuta, we chair the Department of Environmental Science, and it's just been a terrific day so far, seeing everybody come back and talking about their experiences. And what I'm going to do right now is I'll turn the podium over to Linda Bell. She's our Provost and Dean of Faculty, and she'll just say a couple of words, and then I'll come back and I'll introduce our final speaker, Annie Leonard.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks for inviting me to just make a few sort of casual remarks, which I'll do very quickly so we can pass on to the program at hand. But I just wanted to say that it's wonderful to be at these events. These events are celebrations of what Barnard does so incredibly well, and I feel like in this room I'm probably speaking to the chorus. I hope I'm speaking to the chorus. I understand there's a lot of alumni around, so thank you for coming back to Barnard. I understand that and can see that there are many students here. Thank you for everything you do that makes us really who we are, and I can tell you it inspires us as faculty and it inspires us as scholars and as teachers. So it's wonderful to be here to celebrate a department like environmental science. Certainly there is no better moment in history to celebrate the work of a group of people who have dedicated themselves as scholars and as teachers to the issue of preserving and protecting and understanding the environment. And so the fact that we have the ability to sponsor this here today is an honor and a privilege, and it's brought about by the hard work of many people over many years, as we all know. But I just want to shout out the current full-time members of the department, starting with, in no particular order except starting with Stephanie Furman. So Stephanie, as everybody who's had the opportunity to work with her knows, is a force and a visionary. And as she announced earlier today, she will be leaving Barnard, but only in physical being. Her spirit will very much remain here, and it's my first opportunity to say that publicly, but you know how much we'll miss you, Stephanie. You've created something wonderful along with a group of outstanding colleagues, I knew Stephanie a little bit before I got to Barnard, and I've gotten to know her since being at Barnard, and it's been a privilege to work with someone like you. And then, in addition, I'd like to thank the other fabulous members of the Environmental Science Department for really doing what they do so incredibly well. And that is Martin Stuta and Brian Malou and Terry Ann Menza-Gamelsch and also Peter Bauer. These people have built a fabulous program for us to all benefit from. So, unfortunately, I can't stay. I just want to say a few words about Annie Leonard. I know you'll be introducing her. But I would say that we need look no further than Annie Leonard and her fabulous work to realize the value of the college's investment in what I'll call a green curriculum. And when Annie graduated from Barnard many years ago, each person in the U.S. made just over 2 pounds of garbage a day, and today the number has doubled. And perhaps even more disturbing, in the past 3 decades, 1/3 of the planet's natural resource base has been consumed. You can learn these facts, of course, from Annie's online documentary, The Story of Stuff, which examines the underside of our production and consumption patterns. And the work and the heart and soul that Annie has put into educating us all is truly an accomplishment as well. So I wish you a great panel, and thanks for having me here to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Linda. And I do also want to recognize Sedalia Rodriguez. Sedalia, can you stand up? She was the only one in our department that doesn't have an official speaking role, but what? Go ahead.
And I want to recognize Sedalia Rodriguez, too. You were on my notes. I apologize. Where are you, Sedalia? Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, she led a very animated roundtable on consulting, so that was just terrific. So we've already heard some remarks introducing our final speaker, and I just want to say a couple very brief remarks to add on to that. So first of all, the story of stuff, right? I mean, this was one of the viral videos before they really had viral videos. I just remember it was such a hit, everybody was talking about it, and that's exactly, when we're talking about an innovative communication approach, is exactly what we need today. So when we were thinking, who would we like to have come speak who could talk about environmental innovation and leadership, it's Annie Leonard, and to top it all off, she's one of our own. Can you believe that? So we're very proud and honored to have her here today. Just recently, last year, I was working together with a group of colleagues on trying to think about how we could affect climate change communications such that we could potentially reach people that we haven't been reaching in the past. And I was assigned The Story of Change, one of her more recent works, to do as homework, which I thought was also really cool. And now, what's really neat is that, of course, in her current position as executive director of Greenpeace USA, she's taking leadership to, an even higher level than anything that she had done before, and we're really excited to have her here today. So let's give a nice warm welcome for Annie Leonard.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be back here. It really is amazing after 31 years how familiar it feels walking through those gates. So I graduated in 1986. I went on to graduate school at Cornell. I went on to work at Greenpeace and a whole bunch of different environmental organizations, made The Story of Stuff, and then came back and took over as the executive director of Greenpeace about 3 years ago. If any students want to talk about career advice, I'm happy to do that afterwards. What I was asked to talk about today is the state of the environment and how we are going to get to a better future. I'm going to gloss over the state of the environment part because it's kind of a bummer, and also because everybody knows it, right? 400 parts per million, biodiversity loss out of control, dead zones in the ocean, plastic in the ocean, babies born pre-polluted with 165 industrial and agricultural chemicals, and overshooting the Earth's capacity to provide resources and assimilate our waste by a crushing 64%. That's the state of the environment. That is trending very, very badly, and it's very humble for me, having spent basically every day since I graduated working on this, that pretty much everything is trending in the wrong direction. But there is one thing that is trending in the right direction, and that is that today, many, many, many more people know about the problems, and many, many more people care about the problems. That is a sea change from when I was here. When I graduated in 1986, the job of an environmentalist was to convince people that there was a problem, because it wasn't so visible. At this point in 2017, part of the country's flooded, part of the country's on fire. Like, at this point, to not know that there is a problem would require such commitment that you'd have to be working at Fox News or living in the White House. Other than that, it's pretty obvious that there's a problem. So we can now skip the there's the problem part of the conversation and go to the what are we going to do about it part. So that's what I want to talk about today, is what are we going to do about it? How do we get to a better future? I want to start with science and the role of science, because this is the environmental science department, and science is an awesome thing. If you haven't looked at the students' posters on the back there, please do. We absolutely need science. Absolutely, of course. We need good, solid science. If you are not yet declared on your major, I really recommend environmental science. It's awesome. It allows you to travel through the world with such a heightened understanding of the things around you. That said, science is not enough. Now, I thought that science was enough when I left Barnard, and I read every single book I could get my hands on about materials flow in industrialized society. I was obsessed with this. I made really cool charts. I made multicolored charts. I made 3D charts. I waved them around constantly. I lectured people about endocrine disrupting chemicals, and nobody listened to me. It just didn't work. And what I realized is that, like many people who understand science, I was trapped in the myth that the truth will set us free. And the reason I say that is a myth is because if it was true, we would be free. We have so much truth about the stress on the planet. We have so much truth about climate change. I always say the best thing we could do with all the truth we have about climate change is print out all those reports and build a wall all the way around Manhattan to protect it from rising sea levels, because that is about all that it can get us. Truth alone is not driving change. Just this week, over 15,000 scientists from over 180 countries issued this dire warning. I don't know if you guys have seen it going around on social media. It is an open letter to humanity that details with great detail the incredibly diverse and catastrophic threats humanity is facing, and it calls on us to action. That's a pretty big deal. But still, Trump's team is in Paris right now, or in Bonn right now, having sessions about how we need to increase our fossil fuel use and how coal is the answer. And so why is Trump's team in Bonn advocating increased fossil fuel use? It's not because the science is unclear. It's not because they don't have access to the science. It's because good science is necessary but insufficient. We need something else. So let's talk about what do we need to drive the change that we need. Okay, we need innovative green technologies. We've got that, totally, check. From transportation to buildings to making stuff without hazardous chemicals to clean energy to biomimicry to Paul Hawkins' new book, Drawdown, that lists 100 strategies to reduce greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. Like, we've got the innovative green technologies. We know how to do that part. Do we need economic case studies? Check, got that. We have so much documentation that running our businesses, running our economy and societies in a more sustainable manner actually saves money. You see this with so many huge companies, like even Walmart, that has adopted so many zero waste and packaging reduction because it saves money. And if you compare the cost of transitioning to a sustainable society with the cost of business as usual, incomparable. There is so many economic arguments to redesigning how we live. Is it because we don't have the money to pay for this transition? Absolutely not. We've got the money. If you look at the fact that we are giving billions of dollars in subsidies, in direct and indirect subsidies, to the fossil fuel industries that are creating this catastrophic largest threat that humanity has ever faced, we're giving them our taxpayer money. We could just take that money away from them and we could put it in the transition to a clean energy society. So we've got innovative green technologies, we've got economic case studies, we've got money to pay for it. We've got model policies all over the world. I mean, many of the states here, but also internationally, so many countries are adopting more stringent and very successful regulations about getting off fossil fuels, reducing toxic use, extended producer responsibility, so many model policies. Common sense, that's another thing we need, common sense. Check, got that. If you don't believe me, go ask your grandma. Is it a good idea to waste resources? She will tell you. We've got moral authority. We've got indigenous leaders and faith leaders. We have the Pope calling for rapid action on climate change. That's about as good as it gets. We have every single thing that we need to create a sustainable and just society except for one thing, and that is the power to make it so. That is the power to drive through these changes that we know are possible and that we're beginning to see implemented all around the world. So how do we get that power? How do we build enough power to drive change? I want to propose that there are 3 levers that we need to pull, 3 things that we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is engage in and fix and reclaim our democracy. When I graduated from here, I was an environmental science student. I didn't think democracy was really even related to what I was doing. And the more that I have bumped up against obstacles in trying to advance environmental solutions, the more I see that democracy is absolutely crucial. Our democracy should be our absolute best tool that we have to promote environmental solutions, but we can't access it right now because it has been hijacked by corporations and because so many obstacles have been placed for many, many people to participate. A healthy democracy is a precondition for a healthy environment. So anyone who wants to see the kind of solutions that we know is possible, we've got to work on our democracy. It is not just our physical infrastructure, our roads and bridges that are in neglect and disrepair in this country, but it is our democratic infrastructure as well. So we need to engage in our democracy. We need to wrest back our corporate money-marinated Congress. We need to remove obstacles to participation. And we need to make democracy serve people and the planet again. Related to this, we need to protect the democratic space to work for environmental solutions. Now, I've been an environmental activist for over 30 years now, since I organized a campaign against the styrofoam trays in the cafeteria here. Please tell me you don't have styrofoam trays in the cafeteria here anymore, I hope. That was one of my first environmental campaigns. And since then, I've worked to protect forests, to stop toxic waste dumping, to keep fossil fuels in the ground, to fight excessive commercialism. I've done all these campaigns. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's felt like an uphill battle. But all the time, I felt secure working within the context of a public recognition of First Amendment free speech rights, of the right to dissent, of the right to nonviolent protest. And that is now something that is at threat. We are seeing across the country in so many different ways a crackdown on activism entirely, but especially environmental activism, and especially related to extractive industries, especially fossil fuel. This crackdown is taking a number of different places. Now, I want to note the position of privilege that I say this is new, because I realize lots of communities in the United States, especially indigenous communities and communities of color, have felt repression for their activism for centuries. But what I'm proposing now is that it is reaching a new scale, and that we all need to be paying attention to this. We're seeing it in laws. There's over 30 laws that are at different places and stages in states around the country that would actually criminalize protest. There are laws that say that if your organization or you personally invite somebody to a march, like say you put on Facebook page, come to the climate march, and any property damage is done at that march, you can be held financially responsible. That would put an absolute squelch on organizing to come to basic nonviolent marches. There are laws in a couple of states that would indemnify people from driving into protesters with their car. One of the laws actually says, in case you accidentally hit the accelerator instead of the brake. This is like stand your ground with cars instead of guns. And much of this is possible now because of the messages that we've gotten from our top leader in this land, who is really vilifying protesters, talking about the good old days when you beat them up. Last month, 84 members of Congress sent a letter to Jeff Sessions urging the Department of Justice to prosecute anyone who interferes with pipelines as domestic terrorists. And the Department of Justice has said they will agree to do that. Pruitt is the head of the EPA, is working right now to remove the citizen suit provisions from environmental laws in this country. And there's a resurgence of SLAPP suits. SLAPP suits are a particular kind of lawsuit. It stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Participation, and they are designed to silence and intimidate dissent. Right now, Greenpeace is being sued by a number of SLAPP suits, all by a firm called Kasowitz, which is Trump's lawyer. And one of them is for $900 million. They're suing us for opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock. And the CEO of ETP, the company that made that lawsuit, was recently interviewed, and someone asked him, do you think you're going to get the $900 million? He said, this isn't about the money. This is about teaching them a lesson that they can't do that. What he's saying we can't do is stand up and speak out for environmental solutions that are constitutionally protected rights. Now, this is really important because this crackdown on environmental activism coincides with a time in which the government is stepping out of a public role in the oversight of protecting health and the environment. So increasingly, the last line of defense between the planet and those corporations that want to plunder it is environmental activism. So I'm asking all of you to please stand with me in standing up for the right to nonviolent protest to protect environmental solutions, because if we lose the democratic space for that, then we have nothing left. So that is one thing that we absolutely must do, is that we must engage in, we must fix, and we must defend our democracy. We need to get money out and people in. We need to save our democracy by using it. The second thing that we must do to get to this better future is organize. Organize is another word for building the power to drive the change that we know is possible. That's how you build power. You can have power through money, you can have power through weapons, or you can have power through ideas and people. That's ours, the ideas and people, and we can do that through organizing. I used to think that, that our big job was convincing people that there was a problem. Now it is so widely known that there is a problem, and most people know and agree with us. Recent polling is fascinating. It says that 90% of people in this country believe that corporations have too much power in our democracy. That's 90%. 70%, it's actually 73% of the US public wants to see stricter regulations of hazardous chemicals in our consumer products. Over half of the people now, a majority of the people in this country for the first time want, quote, aggressive action on promoting climate solutions. Those are massive numbers of support. That is enough people to drive change. The social movements of the past that we all learned about in history had nowhere near that level of support. I mean, these are numbers of support that social movements would dream of. You know when Martin Luther King said the I Have a Dream speech? Do you have any guess about what his popularity rate was, what percentage of support he had in this country? Depending on which poll you look at, it's between 16 and 20% of support. I mean, 16 to 20, we have so much more support than that. We have more support than those who supported the abolitionists. We have more people with us than those who supported the civil rights movement, the rights for women to vote. We have enough people to drive change if two things. If we protect that democratic space so that we can organize and do nonviolent activism, and nonviolent science-based activism, I like to say, and if we can work to move people from feeling isolated and angst-ridden to together and active. When I released the Story of Stuff film, I didn't actually think that many people would watch it, and I was absolutely amazed that within a couple of weeks, I got 250,000 emails from people who watched it and felt touched by it. And now it's up in the many millions. By far, the number one thing that people wrote to me is they said, I care, but I don't know what to do. They said, I'm only one person. I thought, that is so easy to fix. You just call up a friend, and now you are two people. Look at how that works, and then you can do it again and again and again. People are so ready to take action if we organize them. So our job is to move people, not everyone, but enough people from a place of concern to a place of active participation. That means integrating environmental sustainability issues and democracy issues into all of our curriculum in this program, but across departments. And it also means instilling in students a sense of agency rather than apathy. It also means organizing across issues, across sectors, across geographies, and across demographics. It's not only an environmental crisis that we face. Many people call it a triple crisis. We're having a crisis of sustainability, especially climate, democracy, and equity. That is a triple crisis, and we will only win if we stick together. Staying in our lane of environmentalists, women's rights activists, labor rights activists, staying in all these lanes keeps us divided and weak. But if we can work in an intersectional way, that is how our movement gets stronger. And that's why you see organizations like Greenpeace standing up for Black lives, standing up for the Fight for 15, standing up to support DACA, because we know that on these issues, they are so interconnected that we are going to win or lose together, and I choose win. I want to be on the winning side. The third thing we have to do, we have to fix our democracy, we have to organize. The third thing we have to do is challenge and rewrite the stories that we tell ourselves as a society, as a people. Stories are incredibly important to how we live. Throughout histories, the humans have used stories to understand the world about us. All throughout our lives, when we're going about our day, we don't just make observations, but we place those observations in stories to make sense of them. We use stories to filter the world, to tell right from wrong, to teach us how to behave, how to treat each other, what to value, and even what to think and what to believe. Our stories have tremendous impact on who we are as a people and the scope of what we consider possible. You can really tell this if you go to a different society that has different stories and you see that totally different things are deemed acceptable or possible because they tell themselves different stories. So the stories that we tell ourselves in modern society are part of the problem because they lock us into an unsustainable way of living and they prevent our thinking more expansively about alternatives. And these stories are so omnipresent that we forget they're stories. We start to think they're reality, even physical reality, something unchangeable, as opposed to totally optional human-created narratives that we could name as stories and then rewrite. So I just want to run through a couple of the stories that I think are really dominant in today's society that we need to rewrite. And think about if you've heard these stories and heard them and heard them and heard them because they are so pervasive. One is the story about stuff. This is the story that tells us that our self-worth, that our value in society is communicated, our status is preserved, our life is deemed a success based on the stuff that we own, if it is cool stuff and if we have a lot of it. We are bombarded with this story from the time we are small children. It is everywhere. So as a result, we have a society in which our houses are bigger, our cars are bigger, our refrigerators are bigger, our phones are actually smaller, but that's another symbol of coolness, is how small your phone is. All these things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but what's shrinking is the amount of leisure time that we have with friends. It's our sense of community. The number of friends that people have now is actually less than we had a generation before. So we have more stuff, but we have less of the things that really contribute to a meaningful life. And we're overstressing the planet's ability to continue to provide this constant flow of stuff and then continue to assimilate the stuff that we throw out at the back end. So a different story, instead of it being about consumerism and about more and more and more, a different story that we could tell ourselves is about sufficiency and is about enough. We could buck that story. We could say, my shoes are enough, my clothes are enough, my car is enough, my body is enough, my phone is enough. We could decide to get off that consumer manic-driven treadmill of working longer hours, shopping longer hours, and instead spend time making art, spend time with friends, spend time building that better future that we know how to do. But let's be honest, it's hard to do that if you're stuck in the old story. Another story that I bump into a lot in my work as an environmental activist is the scarcity story. The scarcity story goes like this. We can't afford clean energy or good public schools or healthcare. It's just too expensive. Now, as a nation, we somehow accept this. It's absolutely crazy that we accept this while we are giving billions, with a B, billions of dollars of subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, gigantic tax cuts to the corporation, yet we let our young people graduate from college with a crushing student loan that they have to then carry with them as they enter the workforce. What kind of society accepts burdening young people with tens of thousands of dollars of debt because they wanted to get educated, and then rewards fossil fuel companies for pursuing and defending an energy model that scientists are now debating is either going to bring catastrophic or existential threat? I mean, that is a nutty society that does that, but that's all of us, and somehow we accept it because we've been told that there is no alternative. And they even tease us and say we're idealistic and we all want ponies when we say we know that we could have healthcare and education and clean energy. Related to the scarcity story, there's the trade-off story. I hear this one all the time. It goes like this. Pollution is the price of progress. You have to choose between a healthy environment or a healthy economy. You can't have both. Now, scientists are literally now debating whether the threat posed to us by climate change is catastrophic or existential. That's the level of the debate. Now, there's two possible endgames here besides changing trajectory, which I'm still counting on that one. The two endgames are catastrophic or existential. Do you think anyone's going to be going to Bed Bath & Beyond in either of those scenarios? Like, there is no business on a dead planet. So what we have got to do is break out of this environment versus economy argument and realize that either both are going down or we figure out how to protect both at once. There is an incalculable cost to inaction on climate change, and there is massive opportunity in driving the transition that we need to a clean energy economy. So a different story is that transition to a clean energy economy is the greatest economic opportunity in centuries. How awesome that we are presented with it now at our lifetimes. Jobs are growing in renewable energy at 10 times the rate of jobs in the rest of the economy. That is so exciting. Bring it on. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's dive in. Let's rebuild our energy infrastructure, our built environment, our transportation systems, our modes of production and consumption, and let's do it right this time. That is so awesome that we get the chance to actually fix and change everything. So if you think about it, we actually do know how to build a better future. This is why I don't get discouraged when I looked at the data about the state of the planet, because we have every single thing that we need to build a better future. We have the science, we have the technological innovation, and we even have the money to pay for it. We know the stories that we need to rewrite, and we can start that immediately, today, right now. The one thing we're missing is an inclusive, powerful movement demanding this change. The movement needs to be grounded in good science, but it can't just be scientists. I like to say expertise should be on tap, but not on top. Let's have the expertise, let's know the science, but don't limit it to scientists. We need teachers, we need artists, we need architects, we need doctors and lawyers and urban planners, we need poets, we need athletes, and we need students. Absolutely critically, we need students. If you look at the history of social change movements throughout this country and internationally, students have been at the forefront of every single major progress that we have had. During the civil rights movements, it was students who sat at that counter and really pushed the discussion about desegregation. When I was a student at Barnard, we slept out on the stairs at Columbia demanding divestment from the apartheid regime in South Africa. In Burma, when the dictatorship took over, they actually shut universities because they didn't want students to gather, because they know that when students gather, they create power. Students are powerful. And so that means that so many of you here, you have that power if you decide to use it, if you decide to organize, if you decide to engage in our democracy, and if you decide to promulgate different stories. So my request for you is use it, because the time is now. When I was an environmental science major at Barnard, we were told that there might be this thing called global warming, but they're not really sure. Is it going to make it warmer or colder? It's really early. We don't really know. Now scientists are saying that we have 3 years to turn things around. They used to say 10. We're down to 3 years. This is the moment where we decide the pathway that we're going to go as a society. People often ask me, do I think change is possible? And I say that change is not just possible, it is inevitable. It is absolutely clear that our children and our children's children are not going to be having the same consumption patterns, transportation patterns, food systems that we have today. Absolutely, it's going to change. The question is not if we're going to change, but how. Are we going to change by design, or are we going to change by disaster? Either way, it's going to be hard work. Either way, we're going to lose some things. But if we choose to change by design, we can be more intentional, more just, more strategic, more humane. We can actually get ourselves to a better future. So I'm so glad you're all here today, because this is the kind of gathering, this is the kind of work that this department does that's going to get us to the better future. Thank you so much for being part of it. Table?
We only have time for like 2 questions.
Oh,
Do
can
you
I
wanna
go
do
too
it
long?
here?
Yeah, whatever you want.
Okay. So we have time for 2 questions, and as Annie was saying, the students are empowered, so let's hear from some students first. Any questions from students? No? Oh, come on, you can do it.
I know you're not shy.
I know you're not shy, right? Barnard, bold. Okay.
There's one in the back.
There's one in the
Not a
back.
student.
What directions do you see Greenpeace taking to bring about these changes you're talking about?
That's a big question. Greenpeace is doing a whole bunch of things. I can't go into them all, but I'm happy to meet you afterwards. We have campaigns to end global deforestation by 2020. We have campaigns to protect the oceans. We have a really cool campaign that I love that's a partnership with the Sierra Club, NAACP, and 2 big labor unions. And that's a campaign called the Democracy Initiative, that we are working to get fossil fuel money out of government and people back in. Because all of us, whether you're working on civil rights at the NAACP, whether you're working at worker rights on Communication Workers of America, or whether you're working on climate issues like Greenpeace, we've all realized that the dysfunctional democracy is in our way. So we work on legislation, on corporate campaigns, on engaging the public, on movement building, all kinds of things. Greenpeace has 2 things that we're very lucky about. One is that, it's not just lucky, we chose it, that I'm very proud of. One is that we take no corporate donations. So that allows us to speak for the science as opposed to appease any corporate donors. And the other thing is that Greenpeace is willing to take nonviolent direct action and put our bodies on the line, because sometimes that's what it takes. I want to say, if any of you guys want to join us at Greenpeace and be part of our change-making effort, text the word resist to 877-877. That's my little plug. 877-877. Text the word resist, and we'll add you to our rapid response team when we have opportunities to help drive this better future.
Thank you. Another question? From anybody? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Thank you. That's very talk. So Barnard is embarking on a sustainability initiative, and did a workshop in this room a couple weeks ago, brainstorming ideas. If you have any big picture suggestions or advice for us?
Yeah, actually, I should talk to you later because I've gone to so many colleges and seen so many different innovative things that they're doing. I think that pushing forward sustainability in your own operations is really important for a couple of reasons. One is it teaches people how to make change. And in college is a great place to learn how to do that. So it teaches you how to make change. Plus, trying to drive change surfaces what the obstacles are. I like to think of trying to drive change as like a metal detector to find the flaws in our system. We need to redesign the system, though. The real solution is not going to be by all of us learning to perfect our individual lifestyles within an entire economic system that is designed to reward trashing the planet. What we actually need to do is change the system. So yes, do what you can locally, do what you can at your home, do what you can in your school, because that builds your change-building muscles, but that will never be able to scale up on its own to make the change that we need. We've got to look systemically, change the rules that guide our economy, change the acceptable practices in corporations. That's where the real levers are.
So let's thank Annie Leonard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That was just terrific. So what we'd like to do now is to, first of all, thank all of our panelists and our table facilitators who did such a terrific job today. So let's thank them. And we'd like to have a special thanks to the Office of the Provost for their support. As Linda Bell mentioned, she's really supportive of environmental science, of sustainability, and also she's been very supportive of the student research that Brian had talked about earlier on. The Athena Center for Leadership Studies was also a supporter and one of our partners in this event, and we've had many students who've worked with us. The entire department sort of pitched in and helped with it all, and so let's just thank all of the members of the department since they can't be standing up here today. And with that, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's been just a terrific day, and we've really appreciated your participation, so thank you.
And a huge thank you to Stephanie for bravely leading us into this conversation today, really. And Annie Leonard, wherever you are, you're totally inspiring. I want to help you in any way I can. Going back to how do we get to a better future, as Annie said, the future starts with us, and it starts with baby steps, and macro steps. And when I think about the capability that we have in this room, I think of it coming from a markets perspective. I think of us as capital. We have two types of capital. We have our human capital and our financial capital. And we know that Stephanie and a number of the teachers in this room have led this department and truly built an amazing thing for all of us. And the question is, how do we continue to grow that and nurture that beyond just what occurred in the room today? My biggest takeaway from today personally is, do we have to wait another 35 years to do this? And I think the answer is no. I think we should be doing this on a regular basis. So in Annie's words and in the hopes that we'll activate this community and truly work together to harness our capital, I'd like to challenge you with, if you are in a place where you can hire somebody in this room or offer an internship to somebody in this room, please go to the environmental science department and let them know. If you have an opportunity to resist with Annie, it hasn't been mentioned today, but if you have a thought that you might want to run for office, come talk to us. Because that is definitely something that needs to happen. And from a investment capital perspective and the financial capital perspective, this ship needs money. And so as much as it is uncomfortable to put the ask out there, I've personally been donating to the school since the day I stepped out of those campus gates. And so if you have the ways and the means to do that, consider how you'd like to engage this department in that discussion. A lot of ideas were thrown out at our table related to entrepreneurship, not just at the student perspective, but for the alumna perspective as well, in terms of getting the access to that capital that Annie was discussing. And so if you have ideas and if you have the ways and means, please put them into action, because that is how we will get to a better future. Thank you again for coming today.